Welcome to another deep dive into the mind. Today we're tackling Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. That fascinating framework for how our personalities unfold throughout life. We're going to explore how those early childhood experiences can ripple through the years, shaping who we become.
What's intriguing is that Erikson, unlike many in his field, wasn't initially a psychologist. He was an artist who delved into child psychoanalysis through his work with children. This unique background might explain his intuitive grasp of these stages, almost like an unfolding artistic masterpiece.
Okay, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
let's jump into the first stage. Trust versus mistrust. We're talking about those first fragile months of life. A baby's world is a whirlwind of sensations, right?
Imagine being a tiny human totally dependent on others for survival. It's like being thrown into a new country where you don't speak the language, and the only way to get your needs met is to communicate through cries and coos.
Wow. That's a great analogy. So if a baby's cries are consistently met with warm, loving care, they learn to trust that their needs will be met, that the world, even though it's new and strange, is ultimately a safe place.
Exactly. Picture a baby reaching out their arms and being scooped up instantly with a warm hug. That repeated experience solidifies a belief that the world is a safe and loving place. This isn't just about physical needs being met, it's about emotional connection, the feeling of being cherished and understood.
It's like building that foundational trust that forms the bedrock for all future relationships, right?
Precisely. But if those early experiences are inconsistent or neglectful, a sense of mistrust can take root. Imagine that same baby crying, but their cries are often ignored or met with frustration. They might start to see the world as unpredictable and unreliable, making it harder to form those secure attachments later in life.
That makes so much sense. Okay,
Yeah.
let's move on to stage 2. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Those toddler years when suddenly it's all about me do it and pushing boundaries. I can practically hear the tiny voices now.
It's almost as if they've suddenly realized they have a will of their own, and they're eager to exercise it. Think of a toddler trying to put on their shoes, determined to do it themselves, even if it means the shoes end up on the wrong feet.
Or maybe a fierce battle over what color cup they want to use.
Exactly. These seemingly insignificant struggles are actually monumental leaps in development. This is where that sense of I can do it or autonomy takes shape. It's about developing a belief in their own agency and their ability to impact the world around them.
So encouraging those efforts, even if they're messy or take forever, is crucial, right?
Absolutely. But if we're constantly swooping in and doing everything for them, or if we criticize their efforts, we risk instilling shame and doubt. It's like telling them their efforts aren't valuable,
Yeah.
that they're not capable.
So it's that delicate dance between providing guidance and allowing them the space to explore their own capabilities. Now, on to stage 3. Initiative versus guilt. Those preschool years where imagination runs wild and every day feels like an adventure.
I love this stage. It's where we see that spark of leadership emerge. Think of a 4-year-old, eyes sparkling, leading their friends on an imaginary pirate adventure. That's initiative in action. They're taking charge, creating scenarios, making decisions. It's about feeling confident in their ability to initiate activities and make choices.
It reminds me of that quote, play is the work of childhood.
Yeah,
They're really honing those social and emotional skills through their imaginative play.
absolutely. But if their ideas are constantly shut down, or if they're made to feel guilty for their choices, it can dampen that natural enthusiasm. They might start to hesitate, second-guess themselves, and become less likely to take the lead.
It's like that fear of getting it wrong takes over,
Yeah,
and they'd rather not try than risk being criticized.
exactly. So encouraging their initiative, even if their plans seem outlandish, is key. It's about nurturing that sense of agency and allowing them to explore the world through their own eyes.
So we've got trust, autonomy, and initiative laying the groundwork for those crucial early years. Now things get a bit more structured as we enter stage 4. Industry versus inferiority. It's school time.
The playground shifts to the classroom, and suddenly, there are new expectations, rules, and comparisons with peers. Imagine being 6 years old, surrounded by other kids, all striving to master those same skills. It can be a breeding ground for both incredible growth and potential feelings of inadequacy.
Yeah. I remember the thrill of finally decoding those tricky words in reading class.
Yeah.
And the sting of comparing my artwork to my classmates.
This is the stage where children are developing a sense of competence, the belief that they can achieve goals and be successful in the world. It's about feeling capable and worthy of recognition for their efforts.
So much of this stage feels tied to external validation, right?
Yeah.
Getting good grades, mastering new skills, being recognized for your achievements. I remember feeling so proud when I nailed my multiplication table.
It's like collecting those gold stars, proving to yourself and the world that you can measure up. But what happens when those gold stars are harder to come by? What if a child struggles to keep up, or their efforts go unnoticed?
That's where those feelings of inferiority can creep in, right?
Yeah,
Like maybe you're not as smart or as talented as everyone else.
exactly. And that's why it's so important to emphasize the process of learning, not just the outcome. To celebrate those small victories along the way, and to help children discover their unique strengths and talents. Maybe they're not a math whiz, but they excel in art or music, or they have a knack for building things.
It's about recognizing that competence comes in many forms and that every child has something special to offer. Now, as we move into adolescence, things get really interesting. Stage 5, identity versus role confusion. It's a time of massive change, both physically and emotionally.
Think of it like a caterpillar morphing into a butterfly. It's messy, it's awkward, and there's a lot of experimentation going on. Who am I? Where do I fit in? What do I believe in? These are the big questions that swirl around in a teenager's mind.
It's like they're trying on different hats, trying to figure out which one fits best. One day they're a goth, the next they're a jock. They're exploring different styles,
Music, social groups.
trying to find their tribe.
Exactly, and it can be a confusing and overwhelming time. Erikson called this stage a psychosocial moratorium, a period of exploration and experimentation before committing to a particular identity. It's like hitting the pause button on adult responsibilities and allowing yourself the space to figure things out.
Which is probably why teenagers can seem so unpredictable,
Right.
right? They're still in the process of discovering who they are. And that discovery can involve some bumps along the way.
Absolutely. And while it can be tempting for parents to try and steer their teenagers toward a particular path, it's essential to provide a safe and supportive environment where they feel free to explore different identities without judgment.
It's about trusting that they'll find their way, even if it takes a few detours along the way. Now, as we transition into young adulthood, the focus shifts to stage 6, intimacy versus isolation. This is where those deeper connections, those intimate relationships, start to take center stage.
It's about that yearning for a soulmate, for someone to share your life with, someone who truly sees and accepts you for who you are. But it's not just about romantic love. It's about those deep friendships, those close family bonds, those connections that make you feel like you belong.
It's like finding your place in the tapestry of human connection. But it's not always easy, right? Building those meaningful relationships takes work, vulnerability, and the willingness to take risks.
Absolutely. And if those attempts at intimacy are met with rejection or disappointment, it can lead to feelings of isolation. It's that fear of being alone, of not being good enough, of not being worthy of love.
And I imagine that the world of online dating and social media adds a whole other layer of complexity to this stage, right?
You're absolutely right. It's easier than ever to connect with people from all over the world, but it's also easier to get caught up in the superficiality of online interactions.
Yeah.
It's that pressure to present a perfect image, to curate your life for social media, that can make it harder to form genuine, authentic connections.
Almost like we're constantly comparing ourselves to the highlight reels of other people's lives, which can make it harder to feel confident and worthy of love.
Exactly. So it's about finding that balance between those online connections and those real-life, face-to-face interactions where you can truly be yourself, flaws and all.
Now, as we move into midlife, stage 7, generativity versus stagnation takes center stage. This is where we often see people wanting to leave their mark on the world, right? To make a difference, to create something that will outlast them.
It's like that feeling of, I've taken care of myself, now how can I give back? It's about contributing to society, nurturing the next generation, leaving a legacy. And it can manifest in so many ways. It's not just about having children or building a successful career. It's about finding those avenues where your passions and your skills intersect with a need in the world.
It could be volunteering your time, mentoring a younger colleague, starting a community garden, or even just being a really great neighbor. It's about finding those small ways to make a positive impact.
Exactly. And when we successfully navigate this stage, we experience a profound sense of purpose and fulfillment. It's that feeling that our lives have meaning, that we're making a difference. But what happens when that sense of contribution is lacking?
That's where the stagnation sets in, right?
Right.
That feeling of being stuck,
Right.
of going through the motions without any real passion or purpose.
Exactly. And it can manifest in different ways. Maybe it's a midlife crisis, a sudden urge to make a drastic change. Or maybe it's a slow, creeping sense of disillusionment, a feeling that you're not living up to your full potential.
And I imagine that can be a really challenging experience, to feel like you're not making the contribution you hope to make.
It can be, but it's important to remember that it's never too late to find your purpose, to reignite that spark of passion, whether it's taking up a new hobby, volunteering your time, or simply reconnecting with what brings you joy. There are always opportunities for growth and fulfillment, even in midlife. Now, as we enter the final stage, stage 8, integrity versus despair, we come full circle. It's a time of reflection, of looking back over our lives and taking stock of what we've accomplished,
Right.
what we've learned, and what we've loved.
It's like reaching the summit of a mountain and taking in that breathtaking view. You can see the entire path you've traveled,
Yeah.
all the twists and turns, the ups and downs,
Yeah.
the moments of joy and the moments of sorrow.
And as we look back, we ask ourselves that big question, did I live a meaningful life? If we can answer that question with a resounding yes, if we can look back with a sense of peace, acceptance, and gratitude, then we experience integrity. It's that feeling of wholeness, of knowing that we lived our lives to the fullest, that we made a difference.
It's like that feeling of contentment you get when you finish reading a really good book. You close the cover and savor the experience, knowing that the story will stay with you long after you've finished reading it.
But what if we look back and see a lot of missed opportunities, regrets, things we wish we had done differently?
That's where the despair can creep in,
Mm.
right? That feeling of bitterness,
Yeah.
of what ifs, of wishing you could turn back the clock and rewrite certain chapters.
Exactly. And it can be tempting to get stuck in that loop of regret, to dwell on the past and all the things we can no longer change. But even in the face of those regrets, there's still the possibility of finding peace.
It's about accepting that we made the best choices we could with the information we had at the time, and that every experience, even the painful ones, has shaped who we are today.
And sometimes that involves forgiveness, forgiving ourselves for the mistakes we've made, forgiving others who might have hurt us, and finding a way to let go of that bitterness and resentment.
So it's not about erasing the past or pretending that those difficult experiences didn't happen. It's about integrating them into a larger narrative, a story that encompasses both the light and the shadow.
Beautifully said. It's about recognizing that our lives are a tapestry woven from all of our experiences, the good, the bad, and everything in between.
We've journeyed through all 8 of Erikson's stages, from those first tentative steps toward trust to that final reflection on a life well lived. It's incredible to see how each stage builds upon the previous one, creating this intricate web of experiences that shape who we become.
It's like a symphony,
Yeah.
each movement contributing to the overall masterpiece.
But here's a question I've been pondering. We've talked about how each stage has its own unique challenges and opportunities.
Hmm.
But what about those times when we feel like we're regressing, like we're slipping back into those earlier stages?
That's a fascinating observation, and it actually happens more often than you might think. Those earlier stages don't just disappear, they become part of our internal landscape. And certain experiences can trigger those old patterns and emotions.
It's like those earlier stages become touch points
Mhm.
that we might revisit during times of stress or transition.
Precisely. Imagine someone who developed a strong sense of autonomy in toddlerhood, confidently navigating their world. But then they enter a controlling work environment where their opinions are dismissed and their decisions are constantly second-guessed.
That could really trigger those old feelings of powerlessness and self-doubt, right? Like they're back in that toddler stage, struggling to assert their independence.
Exactly. Or perhaps someone who successfully navigated the intimacy versus isolation stage, forming deep, meaningful connections, experiences a painful breakup or the loss of a loved one.
That could bring up those old fears of abandonment, of being alone, of not being worthy of love.
Absolutely. It's like those earlier wounds are resurfacing, asking to be healed.
So how do we navigate those moments when we feel like we're being pulled back into those earlier stages? How do we draw upon the strength and wisdom we've gained over the years to move through those challenges?
The first step is awareness. To recognize what's happening, to identify those familiar patterns, and to acknowledge those feelings without judgment.
It's about bringing those subconscious patterns into conscious awareness.
Exactly. It's about drawing upon the resources we've developed in the intervening years. If those feelings of mistrust resurface, we can remind ourselves of all the times we've successfully navigated relationships and built trust with others. We can access that inner reservoir of strength and resilience.
It's like those earlier stages become not just touch points, but also sources of wisdom and insight.
Beautifully said. It's about recognizing that our development is a lifelong process. and that each stage, even those we thought we had left behind, continues to offer opportunities for growth and healing.
What a powerful reminder.
Okay.
As we wrap up our deep dive into Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, we invite you to keep exploring, to be curious about your own journey, to celebrate the complexities of human development, and to approach each stage with a sense of compassion, both for yourselves and for those around you.
And remember, it's never too late to learn, to grow, and to continue evolving. Each stage offers new possibilities for transformation and self-discovery.
Until next time, keep diving deep.